Bonjour, here we are again, going at it, ready or not. Here I come. This is the Unexpected Cosmology, of course. My name is Noel Joshua Hadley. And tonight, what I want to do is go over my latest book that I released this month called, let's see, what is it called? Let's get there. Kings and Priests of the Thousand-Year Reign. This is not going to go well tonight because I'm already forgetting the title of the book that I published. Or maybe it'll go just fine. And the reason I'm doing this is I recognize that I have been going at this research, this Millennial Kingdom research, for quite a few years now. And in my head, I have all these different kind of pieces working together. They all fit, but I'm presenting them to you as I, of course, research and write it out of order. And so, unless if you've been following along these last few years, you're getting these little bits and pieces and you're like, how does this all connect? How does this relate? And a couple of weeks ago, I came out with a video called the 7,000 Year Timeline Deception. And my attempt in that one was actually go through my other book, which is the one that goes just before this one on the chronology, is to show you the 500 years from 70 AD to 570-ish AD. Really, I really should say 30 AD to 530 AD, in which the Millennial Kingdom manifested upon the earth at that time in the 530s, or the 500s, according to my reckoning. And I showed you why. Now, my recommendation is to go through that video. And what I did was I took years of research and I compiled it into a 2-hour video, just kind of taking you through all the different events and showing you how they connect and why these extra biblical books have a lot, the ones that were removed from the Bible. I mean, Gospel Nicodemus is one of my favorites. And that one was originally written in Hebrew. It's a phenomenal book. By the way, Adam and Eve was also written in Hebrew originally. Unfortunately, we don't have that original version, though it is thought to have been written in the 1st century AD in Hebrew. That being said, I hope you guys enjoy that, and tonight as well. So let's start going through this. I'm going to be kind of doing a bird's eye scan over the research. And a lot of this you might go, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember when you gave that presentation 2 years ago or whatever. And some of this might be new to you, but I will be reading from a couple sections in here that I've never covered before. And of course, all the dedications of my book are to the people of Revelation 14:12. Revelation 14:12 tells us what the requirements are for those who are set apart, those who make it to the end. The endurance of the set apart ones is those who keep the commands of the Father and the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach. Table of contents. All right, here we go. The resurrection, the 70, and Rome. Now, I've changed my views considerably over the last few years. Originally, when I started going into this Millennial Kingdom research, I had the basic Tartarian package in mind, where I was looking at all these buildings and thinking they were just conglomerates of the same kind of time frame. And since that time, I have really gone back to the official model, the architectural, I should say, columns, in which you have the Gothic cathedrals, and then you have the Greek and Roman revival in the Renaissance/Reformation. And so here we're looking at a picture of Rome. Interesting enough, that obelisk right there, smack dab in the center, we can all have our different opinions and theories as to what they are, what they were originally intended for, outside of the obvious mysteries of Isis. According to the official narrative, here's all I can say, is that I see no records of these obelisks existing during the Dark Ages, the 1,000 years of the Middle Ages, what I call the Millennial Kingdom. In fact, that one right there at St. Peter's, the story is that it is the original one that was there, I think, when Peter was killed or crucified at that very spot, that it was taken down for amazingly 1,000 years, and that it was put back up during the 1500s. It was found laying down somewhere and they put it back up. So go figure. I was actually looking at this picture earlier today, And I noticed all these obelisks that are like street lamps. How adorable, lining the street there. They love their obelisks, their phalluses there in Rome. So starting out, I want to talk about this idea of the resurrection, the 70, and Rome. One of the things I started doing originally was I started from the point of the melted cities, which I covered last time in the 7,000-year timeline deception, and showing how all these melted cities are prophetic, and they point to Peter when he says that Sodom and Gomorrah would be these mile markers of the old world was destroyed by water, now it's fire. And I asked the question, well, when in official history did all these places melt? Because we see this massive judgment event, including all through the American West, New Mexico, Utah, Arizona, the Grand Canyon, that whole region over there. And we see it all over in the Roman world, like through Turkey, in there, a lot of melted cities. And so one of the theories I started coming up with, or a thesis, is that a lot of these cities that we see that actually were not melted, that did survive, one of which, by the way, is Rome, are those that, I'll get to the verse tonight, but where Messiah sends out the 70, and he says to them that it will be worse for those cities on that day than it was for Sodom and Gomorrah if they reject the message. But there are those who embrace it. And so my theory is that those who embrace the gospel, those who embrace Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus Christus, Jesus Christ, if you prefer, whoever accepted his message and his authority. For me, the gospel is his conquering of the earth, his authority over the earth in his resurrection, that they would be spared. And so moving into this, before I get too far into this, there is actually the proposed skull of Mary Magdalene. Yeah, right. But I theorize in here that even if it was, which I don't think it is, I kind of came up with I showed the different ideas of resurrection in different passages of scripture. Now, this is going to take a little bit of open mind, because some people, they can't get out of this box that they were, taught in Sunday school. Again, the Gospel of Nicodemus is a big one for me, because when Messiah went down into Sheol and he brought everyone up, we see multiple different resurrection events happening. We see some people who spiritually go up to heaven and they are resurrected. Well, what does the resurrection mean in this case? They are literally taken from death into life, right? They are dead in Sheol. They're woken up and they're taken into eternal glory. That sounds like a resurrection event to me. And then there were others who were physically brought up out of the tombs. They came onto the earth physically, but then they kind of went off to heaven afterwards. We always hear about these others who they died later on. Actually, that may not be the case. It appears that they were on the earth for a time during Messiah's really 40-day ministry, and then they moved on. And of course, this is a quote here from Peter. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of Elohim, neither doth corruption inherit incorruption. All right. You might get a lot of these all rights tonight as I'm going through this. Here's a big one for me, the Gospel of Philip. I like this. Those who say that Adonai first died and then was resurrected are wrong, for he was first resurrected and then died. If someone has not first been resurrected, then can only die. If they have already been resurrected, they are alive, as Elohim is alive. Now, I get told this a lot, Noel digs into Gnostic texts. Well, have you ever noticed how much Baptist theology is very much like not? Now, I'm not saying this is a Gnostic text. It was found in the desert conveniently next to some what I would call Gnostic texts, the Nag Hammadi collection. But the whole Baptist idea that you are born again, and then when you are born again, you cannot die because you are forever born again, right? That's the worldview I grew up in, guys. That's the Gospel of Philip right here. That's what it's saying. It's saying that for those of you who are waiting to be resurrected, you have it all wrong. Either you've already resurrected, or it's not going to happen. And it's kind of interesting here when you go down to the catacombs. They tell you that these catacombs were Christian catacombs and that they were filled with skeletons. Now they have completely removed them. They say it's for tourist purposes, but we'll never really know, will we? They put these up in museums, and I'm wondering how many of these are really resurrected, because I do believe there was a physical resurrection, and I have cases for that too. I'm just saying it's not a perfect uh, picture. We see multiple different things happening. How many of these people resurrected? How many of them did not? All right, so this is clearly kind of Baroque look to me. This is, what I would call Renaissance now, though these places in Rome did exist during the Middle Ages, and they got a facelift. So I've changed my opinion on it a little bit. However, I can't even get there. Okay, this is talking about the 70 were sent out. I'm trying to get there, guys. I'm sorry. I have a lot to cover tonight. I'm not getting there. Oh, here we go. Okay. Romans chapter 16. And this is where I began my investigation. Holy cow. I started looking at this here, where Paul is just listing off these people in the Church of Rome. Now, for those of you who don't know, I used to be in the anti-Paul camp, not to scare anybody off or anything like that. I am now presently pro-Paul. And so if you don't know, if you're not in the know, that's actually a thing. There are many, many people out there that are anti-Paul. It's one of the circles you kind of come into, when you're coming into the truther movement and looking at stuff. And what brought me back initially was Romans chapter 16. That was one of the things I started looking at, and just started researching all these names and all the different connections they have into all walks of life, all different places of society, with the Herods, the court of the Herods, all that kind of stuff. And what I started doing was tracing those people listed, like this husband and wife team here, who I actually believe are the same Elkanah and Chusa that's mentioned in the Gospel of Luke. They have Roman names and Hebrew names. And of course, he was one of Herod's stewards, and they were very close in hoping to finance Messiah's ministry. So just all walks of life going on here. And I started tracing where all these different people went, the different churches. And my thesis is that these mighty, mighty different churches that we do see may have belonged to different members of the 70 that went out. Capiche? You guys understand that? I don't need to cover this too much tonight, because I have a lot to cover. And of course, here's some of the maybe the churches, the way they would have looked more so during the millennial kingdom. They obviously maybe had a facelift, or it was maybe taken down, but this isn't as as much, whatever. It doesn't look like some of the others. All right, let me get through this. I have like over 400 pages in here to get through. Kings and priests of the 1,000-year reign. I'm going to read through this section here for you guys. I hope you guys enjoy this. Never covered this before. And this section is called On Earth as It Is in Heaven, Little Jerusalem. So what I'm going to cover is, you're going to get a good sense of a lot of the material in here. Finally, it occurred to me that what I needed to do is go back to the very beginning of my investigation and give history, official history, the old college try yet again. It was while researching and writing my paper, The Legend of Prester John. How many of you, raise of hands, how many of you remember that? That was a couple months ago. Attempting to figure out what, if anything, is true in the story of Prester John, that I stumbled upon a man named Abbot Suger. Now, just so you guys know, I tried to Google this guy's name, and it's a French name. And every time I just got back a spelling error, and they're telling me I need to pronounce it sugar, but with an A instead of an E. To me, it looks like sugar. So I'm just going to call him that. And though what I'd already known, Suger is declared to be the father of the Gothic style of cathedral architecture. Yes, the father, according to official history. There he was, staring back at me from the footnotes of the Jesuit history books. And this is during my Prester John research. The all too familiar poopy diaper face politics of his day, practically smothering him. Without getting into all of that again, do recall how Prester John is woven into the fabric of Suger's life. After the fall of Edessa in 1144 to Saracen invaders, it was Hugh, Bishop of Gibelum, who first spun the tale of the legendary priest king Prester John for the court of Pope Gregory VIII. Hugh's report was first recorded by Odo of Duel, Bishop of Friesing, Germany. By all indications, Odo was a news writer and a propagandist. During the Second Crusade, he served as the personal chaplain of King Louis VII of France, being sure to document the entire war, that is the Crusades, from their march to Antioch to its explosive climax at Damascus. If any of this is vaguely familiar, then you may also recall that Odo was a confidant of Suger. In turn, Suger had already been a key advisor to King Louis VI, a position he would continue to hold with King Louis VII after him, acting as the latter's regent during the Second Crusade. Whoops. Although we are told he disapproved of the Second Crusade, at the time of his death, Suger is said to have already started preaching a third. See what I mean? We are often reminded of the rat-infested poo mounds in the Middle Ages, seeing as how nobody, not even Suger, thought to employ Roman plumbing in their designs. Well, there is your poop right there. Sugar's walk-on character part in the stage production. Now that I have gotten those unpleasantries out of the way, official history swears up and down that Suger was the father of the Gothic cathedral. And as you guys hopefully know, for me, the Gothic cathedrals are the actual architecture of the Millennial Kingdom. It is the bones that have survived that 1,000 years, the remnants. Of course, the abbeys and the friaries and the nunneries as well, all that Gothic architecture. And so calling him the father of the Gothic cathedral is no small statement to make. Many of my readers are of the opinion that history is legitimately 100% fake and that it needs to be disregarded before the truth can be discovered in the revision. But I strongly disagree. Despite an onslaught of resets, not all of which were exclusively perpetrated by our controllers, meaning I do believe Yah was behind many of those resets, and that our inheritors didn't have a choice in the matter, I believe there is truth, or in the very least, residue of the truth, to be discovered in the annals of history, however much they have been tampered with. Perhaps Suger existed as a solitary figure. Perhaps he is simply a figment of our imagination, having never existed at all. Or perchance he is a composite image consisting of hundreds of heavenly architects working in unison together. Maybe, I don't know. I couldn't say as I wasn't there. But without commenting further, take a look at his stated accomplishments. So I'll let you guys look at that really quickly right here. This is what we are told is the first Gothic cathedral, specifically the first Gothic cathedral that employed every element of what would then become Gothic architecture. You see the cloisters, the vaulted ceiling, the arches, the thick walls, the rose window, what we call the Baptisteries, the Vesica piscis, which I'll be covering tonight. Give you a clue. It looks like a woman's private part. For everyone who gets so upset by all the obelisks out there, the phalluses, we have the opposite in the Gothic architecture. I have just given you the nickel tour of the Basilica of St. Denis. Now, interesting note that I don't mention in this book is that the Basilica of St. Denis, also being the first Gothic cathedral, according to official history, it also just so happens to be the church that the Jesuits met in their first formal meeting when they created the Jesuit priesthood. They happened to go to that church. So that's really interesting. And the basilica here is north of Paris. What a bell. Or as they might say in France, actually, I'm not going to say what they would say in France because I would murder the beautiful phrase. It basically means you are beautiful inside and out. If you're nowhere near an online translator. From top to bottom, Suger is said to have designed her mostly. And just as importantly, every element that would define Gothic architecture can be found there at that basilica. Check out the vaulted ceilings, as I mentioned, the rose windows, the arches, the octagonal baptistries, the symmetrical spires, and the cloisters, why don't you? I'll be covering that tonight. The ultimate purpose of this paper, as well as this book, is to go over what I suspect their true kingdom purpose was, among other noted features in the Antiquitech investigation. So give me time and we will tackle them in turn. Keeping wholly with the official explanation for the moment, time and again we come to learn that the number one common denominator for the Middle Ages, as descriptions go, is the pilgrimage. I have written a paper on that one. It's included in here. Amazingly, it's called The Pilgrim's Path. Amazingly, the medieval pilgrimage experience has sukkot scribbled all over it. And Sukkot, in case you've already forgotten, or the Feast of Tabernacles, as it is also known, may be the best description of the millennial kingdom that we have, according to Zechariah 14:16-21. Meaning that all the nations had to keep Sukkot. They had to go on the pilgrimage. And do you get that? The Middle Ages, I've looked at so many history books, they will say the number one description is the pilgrimage. People were traveling all over the world to go on a pilgrimage. The carol, or the rondeau, as it is also known, is another important piece of the puzzle. I will refer you to my Night Moves, the chapter in here. The carol is a lost circle dance of the millennial kingdom, meaning it's been scrubbed, though we know it existed. And the residue is worldwide. The carol also testifies to Sukkot. Everything is interrelated and there are no coincidences. And so why am I not surprised to learn that Suger's entire reasoning for the Gothic design was in his wanting a place worthy of pilgrims? That's the stated purpose. He built them for the pilgrimage. Contained within many of the Gothic cathedrals were labyrinths, unique pilgrimage tools for acquiring the kingdom within. Not sure who designed those, but Suger is specifically accredited with stained glass windows. Assuming for the moment that stained glass windows were present and accounted for, because many in this field of research believe that they were added at a later time, I'm not so convinced of that. Suger's rationale was that the beauty of the light through the stained glass helped to transport the pilgrim to a higher spiritual state through meditating upon them. Eventually, you will want to go through another spinoff, which is in here, Mary Magdalene and the Mandala, because the rose windows are mandalas in every sense of the word. Don't confuse that with the Mandela effect. These are mandalas. Geometric configuration of symbols which establishes sacred spaces. A third eye allowing its practitioners and adepts to achieve their spiritual goals. Every single cathedral you walk into, you can go through that big door. Right above it is a third eye. That big old rose window. It's a mandala. It's sacred geometry. It's showing you how to come into a place of worship, into that space where within this within this kind of microcosm, you can enter this kind of macrocosm of cosmology. Well, if you read that one, the Mary Magdalene and the Mandala, then you may recall the very mysterious pseudo Dionysius, and he comes up a lot. This mystery guy was very inspiring to the Gothic people, whom the equally mysterious writer of the Cloud of Unknowing was inspired by. So this Dionysius character, the dude was a late 5th to 6th century Neoplatonic philosopher who strangely enough identified as the very Dionysius whom Paul converted in Acts chapter 17. Smoke that pipe, why don't you? Also hold my pipe for the moment, because Dionysius described the universe as consisting of the Father of lights, being God, the first radiance being Christ, and the smaller lights being people. It appears as though Suger was inspired by him as well, because the cathedral was purposed with expressing the glory of the Creator, of the Father, on the earth and his incarnation into matter. For Suger, a key ingredient was light, and the true light of the world was Mashiach. Therefore, light and its presence in a church were important in communing with the Creator. If you stop and think about it, stained glass windows are illustrative tools to help mortals perceive the colors resulting from wavelengths which only immortals are capable of seeing. It's almost like an artificial way of seeing what the maybe immortals resurrected are able to see. Does that make sense? Maybe you'll never look at stained glass windows the same way again. And again, stained glass windows were an invention. They were a unique invention of the Middle Ages, of the Millennial Kingdom. There is more evidence for you that Suger, the real Suger, was not immortal. Everything contained within the cathedral had a distinct purpose, which was to awaken within the pilgrim the profound conscious awareness of God's presence or the Creator's presence. Stated in a slightly different way, he furthermore believed that the invisible spirit of the Creator is made visible in stone, light, and tinted glass. Suger described his tall ceilings, large open spaces, pointed arches, and light through stained glass as the, quote, jewels of heaven. The cathedral was intended to be nothing less than heaven on earth. So here are some examples of New Jerusalem. And it's interesting that when the medievalists would draw pictures of renewed Jerusalem, the brick and it's what I call the brick and mortar Jerusalem in heaven, because there's as far as I'm concerned, there's two New Jerusalems at play, two renewed Jerusalems. There is the living stones that each of us make up Jerusalem on the earth, but there is also there's an esoteric and an exoteric kind of two parts at play, and there is a physical Jerusalem. So I see both. So much as it was with Moshe looking to heaven and creating the tabernacle blueprint, as well as the kingdom mysteries contained within, and that's where we get the book of Leviticus, based, of course, upon the body of Melchizedek, it is my personal thesis that cathedrals were intended to create an entrance to the heavenly Yerushalayim. I see evidence that the medievalists viewed the heavenly city as much more than a brick and mortar destination. For them, the earth was a kingdom and the city come down, with the individual citizens making up its living stones. And I hope to cover more of that tonight. And the wall of fire often surrounding their maps was the Ruach HaKodesh, separating them from the outer darkness. And if you don't know what the Ruach HaKodesh is, that's the Holy Spirit. You will see what I mean when you finally get around to the Pilgrim's Path. In the meanwhile, allow me to help you along with my own thought process. This comes from Ezekiel chapter 11. Therefore say, thus says Adonai Yahweh. And that's the paleo for Yahweh or Yahweh or Yahuwah, if you prefer. Some of you prefer Jehovah. This is the paleo, his original name. Although I have cast them far off among the heathen, and although I have scattered them among the countries, yet will I be to them as a little sanctuary in the countries where they shall come. Ezekiel 11:16. Without going into a much larger study involving the 7 golden menorahs of Revelation, it is once more my thesis that heavenly Yerushalayim, the city in the sky, is Gothic by design. Perhaps there are Byzantine flavors and splashes of the Romanesque here and there. I mean, the heavenly city is, after all, a massive one. But that is how the medievalists depicted the city anyhow, as a Gothic one, complete with castle walls and turrets. Whoever this Suger was or is, my research has led me to believe that the cathedral was designed as little Yerushalayim's. Featured at St. Denis is a headless man, his name being Denis of Paris. It doesn't take a sleuth to deduce that Suger's magnum opus was named after him. Remember when I told you to hold my pipe? I will be asking for its safe return now. Denis was the bishop of Paris, and his name is short for Dionysus, as in pseudo Dionysus. As tradition would have it, Dionysus, the original Dionysus, first mentioned in Acts 17, was beheaded during Domitian's reign, somewhere near the end of the 1st century. Others claim St. Denis is being misidentified, and the Dionysus we are looking for was beheaded under the persecution of Decius, or Decius, maybe, if it's a hard or soft C, shortly after AD 20. Arguably, we are looking at 3 different Dionysiuses, all of which are attributable to St. Denis. Or contrarily, the composite is not a man, but the timeline. So check this out here. Of course, you can see this today in modern-day Paris. Beautiful, big arch domes, very spacious, so on and so forth. And there's the construction. I got to, always include the construction photos, because if I don't, somebody's just going to throw it in there. Like they get, they have one over me or whatever. The story has, man, I always forget to turn off my Discord community. Apologies. Let me mute this for you guys here. Ha ha ha, muted. All right. The story of Saint Denis's fateful meeting with the Roman lumberjack at the top of the hill in Paris. It's the hill of Montmartre, right about where this bell happens to reside. The heavenly basilica, it's called the Sacre Coeur, supposedly took 40 years and 5 architects to build, being completed in 1914. So you can see the construction photos right there. The very year in which the First World War started in Europe. I'm including construction photos so that you can't accuse me of holding the facts. Can't accuse me of turning a blind eye. I may be a skeptic, but that is because I've seen too much and take the official history, seen too much to take the official history at its word. They just love to show people standing around in these photos, don't they? Watching construction unfold slowly, 40 years worth. Continuing with this story, Denis is said to have picked up his head after it was removed from his shoulders, only to walk several miles from the summit of the hill, preaching a sermon the entire way. The site where he stopped preaching and actually died was afterwards marked by a small shrine, which was then honored by the Frankish kings. Kind of interesting, because the Frankish kings are the long-haired kings who appear to have taken a Nazarite vow, which means they wouldn't have drunken wine for as long as they took that vow. The Frankish kings apparently had this superpower. I mean, they were like these Samson characters, and if they broke their vow, they had to cut their hair, and if they cut their hair, they could no longer be king. So it was the site of his death was honored by the Frankish kings and finally chosen as the location for Suger's first Gothic cathedral, which reminds me of another thesis of mine. In the resurrection of the 70 in Rome, which I just went through, I can't help but wonder if the resurrected kings and priests of the millennial kingdom were given authority over the places they'd served and perhaps died the martyr death during their mortal life. Basically meaning that where they served, where they died is where they were chosen to rule over the people there, the very kind of individuals who made them a martyr. Oh, and by the way, the term Gothic did not actually enter the collective consciousness until Enlightenment inheritor Giorgio Vasari applied the term to Suger's work. The reason being that he wanted everyone to think the cathedrals were rude and barbaric, which is like the complete opposite is true. They're beautiful. Whereas neoclassical architecture was all the flav, you all know, cap. There may be more truth here than simply propaganda for the Medicis. I'm sorry to once more do this to you, but for that you will need to read The War of the Sons of Light Against the Sons of Darkness paper, a presentation I gave a couple months ago now, which can be found in my 7,000-year timeline deception book. The term Goth was interchangeable with Jew. Don't be alarmed quite yet. To be called a Jew was equivalent with Nazarene or Yasharel behavior. So when we hear of them calling people Jews in the ancient world, we're thinking, like some sort of genetic people like descended from, Judah. Actually, that's not entirely true. There were many people who were called Jews, and they're just being lumped in by the fact that they were a Revelation 14:12 person. They were obeying the commands. So, of course, being equivalent to Nazarene or Yasharel behavior is the same thing as keeping the commands and the testimony of Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach. The point I am trying to make here is that they are only called Gothic cathedrals because we are expected to think of them in ugly terms, though the neoclassical inheritors were applying the same technology to their buildings. And ironically, the Goths may have, in fact, been the ones to build them. Have you looked up the name of Suger lately? It is a noun, and it literally means this: a person or thing that sucks. Sugar, which I guess is the opposite of sugar, which is, sweet, right? This one just sucks like a bad lemon. Why do I get the feeling that the inheritors either changed the meaning of his name, or jumbled a conglomerate of MK kings and priests into the moniker for mockery purposes? I get it. The architect of Basilica of St. Denis, totally sucked face. Real mature guys. Entering into St. Denis through its massive bronze doors, one can't help but to observe a depiction of Messiah on his throne, surrounded by Miriam and the 12. But which Miriam are we talking about? I am of the opinion that the evidence supports Miriam of Migdal, particularly in France, up until the time when the RCC scrubbed and replaced her with Miriam the Mother. And I'm going to be presenting more on that in the coming weeks. Hopefully, I'm going to be, I hope, showing evidence that the original cathedral builders were dedicating them to, when they would call them the Lady, like Notre Dame, the Blessed Lady, they're actually referring to Mary Magdalene. They're not referring to Mary the Mother. That is the same thing as when they brought in all the idols and they just swapped things, and it was very convenient. Same name, woman, same name. They just changed things around. Below them, so below the woman Mary and Mashiach and the 12, below them, the dead are rising from the grave. And within the greater scene, we see the 24 elders that are spoken about in Revelation. And I know what most of you are already thinking. Can it be said that the builder of St. Denis depicted a judgment event which had already occurred? A royal priesthood. Now, a lot of when people think about wealth, they think about, what is his name? The dragon, Smog. I always want to say Smug because he's smug, but Smog from The Hobbit. And, he's like a dragon on his pile of cash, on his gold. And people look forward to, I've seen this before, where people are looking forward to all the riches they're going to have in the millennial kingdom. Well, I personally think that the cathedrals are a great testimony to the riches that were here and what they were used for. They were used for the healing of the nations. Now, Matthew chapter 6 says, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." We read this in Revelation, "And he that overcomes and guards my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron." One more reference, another one from Revelation. "They lived and reigned with Mashiach 1,000 years. They shall be priests of Elohim and of Mashiach, and shall reign with him 1,000 years." So the idea, of course, that I'm going to be developing in this whole 400-page paper, this book, is this idea that the co-reigning with Mashiach, when they're taking the leaves of healing from the tree of life and bringing it to the nations to heal them, is that these cathedrals worked as healing centers. Of course, a problem we run into with the Middle Ages, and one of my favorite, is what I call royal pains. This picture up here you see is Roman plumbing. This is from a Roman ruins, and they like to design their toilets so that you could continue the conversation from the dining area. You get all the guys in there still keeping it going, chatting it, pulling their pants, just sit down there, take your dump, and don't waste any time. Social time, I mean. Of course, over here we see one of the first toilets that was introduced during the Renaissance Enlightenment era. It would take Queen Elizabeth's godson, Sir John Harrington, to create the first flushing toilet in 1596. As soon as the Dark Ages were over, and then finally somebody named Thomas Crapper. Yes, that is not a typo. Thomas Crapper, to turn it into an art form in the 1860s. So the problem is that there was no plumbing during the Middle Ages. So Suger never thought to include Roman plumbing. Why is that? You're looking at a picture right here, what's called a golden tower. It is also called a siege house or a gong, though I think golden tower may be my favorite. Right there, if you could see it, there is that little hole you see right there is apparently the pee hole. So they would, they would just go into, I mean, how many of these were in a, I mean, how many of you have a household with just 3 or 4 children? You have a wife or maybe a husband, and having to wait for that bathroom. And imagine if the food goes bad and someone has diarrhea and then everybody has it. Imagine in this castle, all having to run to this golden tower here. And apparently it went right down into the water surrounding the castle, which is just idiotic for anyone to do. And of course, the whole idea is that everyone was laying in their own poo for 1,000 years, covered in fleas and fecal matter and rats. Well, the camp of Israel was something like 12 square miles when they were out in the wilderness. And I ask you, how where were the bathrooms, right? I mean, they had to basically carry their poop outside. So if you're walking 6 miles each way, even if it was a mile each way just to unload your poop every day, you would be doing that almost full time. It would be a huge effort. In fact, this has become an issue for a lot of people looking into this, theologians trying to figure out the poop problem of the wilderness generation. Well, I propose to you that the wilderness generation, those who crossed over into the promised land, are those who also came into the millennial kingdom. And of course, in Revelation, it says that he that has an ear, let him hear what the Ruach says, and to the called out assemblies, to him that overcomes will I give to eat of the hidden manna. So that is a trademark of the millennial kingdom, that there's going to be manna that's coming down just like the wilderness generation. And you probably all heard the proposition put forward that the people who lived in these castles, some people have called them breatharians, meaning they didn't need to eat or drink, right? So what's going on? Well, according to, this is the Legends of the Jews, it talks about the manna that came down, it would taste like whatever you wanted to taste like. But not only that it would dissolve in your body and you wouldn't have to poop it, with one exception. If you sinned, then you poop it out. And so the people who would sin in the wilderness generation, they would have to take the walk of shame carrying their poop, and everyone would know that they had sinned. This is, of course, another issue for Protestant thinking, classical Protestant thinking, where you are just a wretched scumbag and you cannot live a righteous life, and it is impossible for you not to sin. I've heard this growing up. It's a terrible, I guess, doctrine that's put forward to people, where they just feel like they cannot achieve anything and they're just worthless. And so when they hear about these people taking this righteous path of choosing not to sin and obeying the Torah, they just think it's this heavy burden and impossible, because they've been fed this propaganda their whole lives. Yes, you can choose not to sin. You can actually do it. You can keep the Sabbath. You can choose not to murder. You can choose not to commit adultery. You can choose to obey your parents. It really isn't that hard. And you get better at it as you go along. Point being, you can choose to not poop if you're eating this manna. And we see the same thing in the sense of Yaakov, or the sense of James. So I really love when you're seeing something in the Jewish commentary, the rabbinical commentary, that actually lines up with what we would call Christian commentary. In this case, it's Nazarene commentary, but he says the same thing, that the manna given to them was from the bread of heaven, and it turned into whatever taste one desired. Which reminds me of course, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory right there. Ronald Dahl knew something. So some of these stories, if you've ever been to Louis the 13th Palace of Versailles, this is what it looks like. It's glorious, purely glorious. And they tell us that there is not a single toilet designed in this whole place. And they will tell you stories there when you take the tours. The people were just pooping everywhere. Like it was running down those hallways. People were squatting in corners and it smelled awful. And it's like, really, like and they also tell us that this was built as a hunting lodge. Like the very flamboyant King Louis would just on an occasional weekend go deer hunting, and they built a whole palace out of gold that of course would have to have servants around the clock keeping this year round, pooping in the hallways, so the king would show up to a very smelly place. Sounds awful. I'd rather live in a tent. I mean, really. And there's stories, of course, of Marie Antoinette. There's actually a lot of stories. This lady over here on the left, D. Harcourt, she apparently would just walk around pooping in her dress, and it would just run down her legs. which is just nasty. And for those of you parents who have potty trained your children and you've seen this, you're like, that's no way to live. But apparently she did. And Marie Antoinette, there are stories told that when they, that they're like her kitchen was just popping open with poop everywhere. And she would go walking below the places where they were throwing out the poop, and it would just land on her and stuff like that. It's like, it's just nasty stuff. And nevertheless, they have water fountains, right? But they didn't think, with clean water, but they didn't think to put in plumbing. Very, very strange. Let me start getting into what I call good vibrations, the cymatics of sacred spaces. Now, there have been tests done on these. Cymatics was a term first coined by Hans Jenning in the 1970s, and it is a study of geometric patterns created by sound vibrations. So in 2013, there was an artist named Tanya Harris. She went about to demonstrate the hidden reality of the cathedrals, or cymatics. And she targeted these specific 4 cathedrals in the city of London, which were apparently built by the same architect. And you can see the floor layouts there. And when she basically put the patterns, she basically recorded silence, just total silence. There was no organ playing, nothing. She recorded the silence, played it back, did a little cymatic CSI work on it, and she got these beautiful rose windows, or these mandalas. So isn't that interesting? So the idea of these third eye mandalas, these rose windows that you pass under when you go through the big door, that's often looking like a Vesica piscis, interestingly enough, you're actually entering this sacred space that actually forms that very sacred space that you're supposed to enter into, kind of within as well as without, micro and macro. All right, symmetrical spires and spikes. These can be found on countless cathedrals across Rome. And this was one of the things that first really just dropped me on my butt, like just fell out of my chair when I started studying the fact that, it's one of those things we never really think about our whole lives. And yet all across the world, whether it's the Byzantine tradition or the you could say the Catholic tradition, if you want, the Orthodox, these different traditions, whether it's Gothic or Greco-Roman revival, they all have these same cake toppers, just pointless spirals and spikes that can be found on top of them. It's like, well, they were just, like I said, just cake toppers. There was no reason for them to be there. We also see copper and gold make for excellent conductors of electricity, and that's what we find on these domes. Now, I do want to point out that domes were very popular during the Greco-Roman revival, but we do see instances of domes in what I believe are the Millennial Kingdom structures as well, particularly with the Orthodox tradition. They were there. So, of course, the thesis that is being put forward is that these cathedrals were used to harvest energy from the ether for the benefit of mankind. And these were places of, everyone gets into the free electricity and that kind of stuff, the free energy, which totally makes sense that the government would want to, close that technology down and bill us for it. Totally makes sense. But it's more than that. I mean, this was about healing the nations, like literally, physically, spiritually healing them in every way, shape, and form. Totally organic healing that has since been scrubbed and erased. So here's a bunch of the domes. And, my position is that they're cavity resonators. Here's a picture of a microwave and a cathode over here. And interestingly enough, we see these cathodes. Well, these are the rose windows that are in front of them, but no, I'm skipping ahead. We see the cloisters as well, and they basically look the same, right? You see the cathodes in there. And there we are there's a picture of a cathode, which of course is where we get the word cathedral, right? A cathode and cathedral sounds very similar. Here we have the baptisteries, And this was another thing that really got to me, because we see these all, not just in cathedrals, guys. We see them in Islamic, or what they were actually called Baphomets, the Islamic temples and such. We see these octagonal shaped baptistries, and we see them in the form of bandstands. And of course, if you guys, this might be familiar for a lot of you if you probably watched that documentary, I think it was called The Lost History of the Flat Earth. These are often placed very near to the domes or under the big spires, and they probably held some engine within them, something resembling like a tokamak engine. We see it with the bandstands as well, out in public spaces. And the thing is about baptistries is that the Millennial Kingdom saints, when they were either being baptized and cleansed or baptizing people, they would want to do so near living water. And speaking of the harvesting of energy, all these Millennial Kingdom cities, these star forts, these star cities, they were all built around water. And of course, you see the moats around the castle, right? It wasn't to keep the physical dragons out. It was, well, to keep the spiritual dragons out, very much so. But they would have gone to living water. So this would have been used by our inheritors, controllers for, they would have told us these were for baptisms, but I don't believe that is the case for its original use. Here's a great example here, the Pisa Baptistry of St. John. I can't wait to go there. I'm hoping to go see the Tower of Pisa. It's on my bucket list to go there. But even more than the Leaning Tower, I want to see this baptistry. I mean, they tell us that this thing took 211 years just to build this baptistry right here. When you look closer at it, it has these giant doors, and oh, there's Florence Cathedral there. This one has some giant, massive doors on it there, but it's the same thing. You see this big, giant dome. They're usually going to have these two towers in front of all these buildings. By the way, I am of the opinion that the two towers represent Mashiach and Miriam, the king and the queen, and that this was scrubbed later on by the Catholic Church. But these doors are just massive, big and beautiful. Took hundreds and hundreds of years to build. And there's some more of these baptistries just sitting out, just like in the middle of just awkward spaces like this. Like, look at this. It's like it's got a little bird bath on the inside. Why in the world is that there? In a little bit, I'll show you some of the residue from that. I have been to Chambord, beautiful place. It has all sorts of spires up there. I'll be talking about that in a few minutes. And then we have these right here. These are reliquaries. And I think that our inheritors and controllers didn't really know what to do with these. And so they would tell us that they were built, these beautiful little different things were built to, they built, like put like fingers in, like fingernails and hands and follicles of hair, you know, a tooth, or, you know, something that they recovered from one of the saints or the 12 or whatever. And it's weird. Like the whole thing is just so weird. I would actually like to go look at some of these in museums, but these were probably also used for energy as well. Okay, so here's some of the surviving pictures that you can find that were in these towers, these octagonal shaped bandstands and other places. You can actually see people removing them. This is probably what the engine looked like. This, you know, what some people call like a tokamak engine. So we don't have a lot of those pictures that survived. Let's keep looking here. You guys can just kind of get a sense for a lot of this stuff. Talk about the horseshoe magnet, the arches, like this one in Paris. I had the epiphany that the one in Rome is actually not showing Titus. It may actually be showing the Goths going in and retrieving the temple artifacts, that it may not actually be what we think it is. Of course, okay, let me just go back. Of course, you guys know that the horseshoe magnet is super powerful, right? And so when you have huge arches like this, what was it powering, right? But we see the same arch design for the magnet arch design for bridges all over. All right, pipe organs. Have you ever sat and listened to one of those those bad boys, they were harmony bombs. One of my favorite soundtracks of all, or I shouldn't say soundtracks, albums, classical albums of all time is Saint Saëns, the French guy, and he plays this organ and just blasts it. If you have it like the volume all the way up, it's like you fall up backwards out of your chair. And each song, of course, would have been tuned and played at the sacred healing tone of 528 hertz, not the 440 hertz garbage which they play in music nowadays. Divide by 12 leaves us with 36.666. That's the science number right there that we see with 440 hertz. Let me just go over this real quick post mud flood history lesson. In 1885, the Music Commission of the Italian government declared that all instruments and orchestra should use a tuning fork that vibrated at 440 hertz rather than the standard of 435 hertz, which preceded it. In 1917, the American Federation of Musicians followed suit with an even heftier push for 440 hertz in the 1940s. By 1953, a worldwide standard was agreed upon and signed. From that moment on, 440 hertz not only became the definitive guideline for how the middle A on the piano was tuned, but the frequency for all instruments on the chromatic scale. So, the whole point here is that organs, when tuned properly, not to the modern frequencies, they were, of course, played for healing. It was Hans Zimmer who actually said in an interview, it really struck me. He was talking about when he did the soundtrack to Inception, and he decided to do an organ theme soundtrack, that he said that the most complex machine on the earth during the Middle Ages was the pipe organ. Now, of course, not forgetting the whatever was in these engines and so on and so forth, but still, that's pretty crazy stuff. All right, I'm just going to skip a lot of this. Fireplaces, cities burned. You guys can see, you guys can get it and read it. These are the two towers I was telling you about. One of the commonalities, we see commonalities all over the world. You see the two towers. We see the big door in the middle. We see the two little doors on the sides. Of course, I am of the opinion that the two towers were representative of the king and the queen, the rulers of the earth. I actually have a text that I haven't shared with you guys that actually talks about that. All right, this is what really got me excited. The Vesica, piscis, the sacred divine and millennial kingdom architecture. So this is something that, a lot of people don't want to address or deal with, particularly if they are not into the sacred divine. What do I mean the sacred divine? I'm talking about the feminine divine and the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. And of course, we know that the Chokmah, that's the Hebrew word for wisdom, in Sirach, she calls herself the mother of Israel. She says that Israel is her inheritance. She is a real divine being. And it is important to note that wisdom literature was through the roof popular officially during the Middle Ages. I mean, they were reading Wisdom of Solomon. They were reading Wisdom of Yeshua, which is, of course, Sirach. They were reading Odes of Solomon and, of course, Proverbs and the Standard Fare. So 153, that's an important number. That's a Pythagorean number. Well, it's interesting that when we see in the Gospel of John 21, that's 153 fish were caught. It was a very specific number, causing many people to turn their heads like, what? Why are you talking about 153 when that is clearly Pythagorean? It is standard with the life of Pythagoras. Now, I comment in here that it is my opinion that the story of Pythagoras, where he talks about the exact number of the 153 fish, does not predate the Gospel of John, even though Pythagoras, I'm so sorry. Someone's going to correct me. Pythagoras. But that came at a later time. We don't actually have the sources on the original. The writing that talks about that came at a later time. Even if it wasn't, though, it wouldn't bother me either way. It really wouldn't. So something to think about with the 153 is we get this right here, the Vesica piscis. It is the green part of the two circles that are brought together. It's the lens over the two discs. And what does it look like? It looks like an ichthys fish, a Jesus fish, Jesus Christus fish, and it's the symbol of the millennial kingdom. It's everywhere. Another thing that reminds us of is, well, if you need an example of it right there, the 153, the Christian fish. There it is. I could show you my arm. I actually have a tattoo of this fish on my arm. The only tattoo I ever got. It is referred to as a fish's bladder, which, hopefully this isn't going to get perverse, but it's not that my mind goes there, but it's a reference to a female organ. And you see this here, that the idea of the Vesica piscis is that with the 153 number, you have the male and the female coming together, just as you would with the organ. What is this quote here from the Book of the Nazarene, 1610? Yahusha said, marriage is the blending of two ruach, two spirits. Fornication is the joining of flesh. And from the same book, Salome, which would have been his aunt, said, Master, when will the rule of Elohim come? And Yahusha replied, when women place greater value on the treasures they hold, for men will strive harder for gold than for brass. When a man and woman cease to pander to the flesh and become truly one in ruach. For of this I assure you, unless man and woman exalt the ruach above the flesh, they will not know life and glory. I have whole teachings on the marriage of spirit, the marriage of ruach. Here's another one. He says in the Gospel of Thomas, Bezorah Tayom, Yahusha saw some infants being nursed at the breast. He said to his disciples, these nursing infants are like those who enter the kingdom. His disciples asked him, then shall we become as infants to enter the kingdom? Yahusha answered them, when you make the two into one, when you make the inner like the outer and the high like the low, when you make male and female into a single one, so that the male is not male and the female is not female, then you have eyes in your eyes, a hand in your hand, a foot in your foot, and an icon in your icon. Then you will enter into the kingdom. Some provocative stuff right there. All right, well, let's keep looking. This talks about the sun and the moon, their part to play in this. Okay, I don't need to go over that tonight. But there you see the sun and the moon, Vesica piscis. What I really wanted to cover here was, the age of Pisces. And so the Jesus fish, the Yeshua fish, whatever you want to call it, the ichthys, it is a symbol of the age of Pisces. So if you remember my my video I did on the Anunnaki/Watchers, in that Marduk, Moloch, who I believe is the same as Azazel. I could be wrong on that, but I believe Baal is the Satan, the big bad dude that we talk about, even though there's many Satans, right? He says in the Sumerian literature that when he basically conquers all the other gods, he started out as a little guy. He wasn't the big guy. But when he finally, and he wasn't one of the watchers too. It's interesting in that text that the 200 watchers come down for Marduk's wedding. And that lines up with Azazel that we see in Enoch. And he said that the age of Aries was his age, that he would rule through the age of Aries. Well, what followed the age of Aries was Pisces. In Pisces, we have the fish, the Vesica piscis, and the two fish are a male and a female. And again, this is going to trigger some people, this is just where my research has led me, that people are always, when you get into the research of the feminine divine, and you hear a lot of kind of liberal feminists bemoaning the fact that the feminine divine doesn't, has been driven away and isn't here, and we have to deal with all these, this patriarchy and these fallacies. Well, when you recognize that the Ruach HaKodesh is Chokmah, is wisdom, the one that's talking about in Proverbs, that she says that she was there before the creation of the world, that she was there, she walked the deep, she went, she has a throne above the vault of the heavens, all this kind of stuff, that she is the mother of Yasharel. You recognize that there was an outpouring of the Ruach HaKodesh, of Chokmah, wisdom, upon the earth, and that it came with the introduction of the kingdom in the age of Pisces. There you go. You have your feminine, masculine, you have your matriarchy or patriarchy, the feminine divine, the masculine divine working together. Yahusha HaMashiach, the Ruach HaKodesh. There's your age of Pisces. Of course, now we're in the age of Aquarius, most likely. I wanted to bring this up too, because, the interesting thing about the official timeline is that the Gothic cathedrals were not started until after the Crusades, really around the 1100s. And that it was only the late Middle Ages, the last half of the Middle Ages when these cathedrals were built. Now, are they making this up or not? I think that there's actually truth to this, because when you look at Enoch's 10-week timeline, you have this age of apostasy, this week of apostasy that follows Yahushua HaMashiach's ascent to heaven, which, of course, is not just the birth of Rome, but it is, of course, the doing away with the Torah. To any Hebrew thinker, including Enoch, the doing away of Yah's instructions in righteous living is apostasy. There's no other apostasy. That is lawlessness, right? So there was this age of apostasy, but then the millennial kingdom kicked in, even on Enoch's calendar. But interestingly enough, it goes over 2 kind of different weeks, and it's only in the last half that they build these big places. So what they were doing in the first half, they were ruling. I don't know. Maybe they were just in the old structures. I don't really know, but I find that really interesting. And the thing is when you're, are we in the age of Aquarius now, or are we still in Pisces? Are we still in the age that was the millennial kingdom? And I think that Enoch's calendar works the same way, because when you're looking up at the zodiac, so you're going from Aries to Pisces to Aquarius, it's not like a fine science of knowing when you're in a different age. Now, if the sun in the spring equinox starts out in the stars, we know we're in that age, but there's the black space between. And some of these constellations are bigger than others. They're not all equal. Some are small, some are big. So that tells us some ages are bigger. And, when the sun is in between the two, where does one end and where does one begin? You see what I mean? So I think Enoch's calendar works the same way. Oh, and then we see the Magdalene, or the Migdal. She adds up to 153 as well, which she is actually in that very scene when it talks about the 153 fish. Just food for thought. This is where I talked about the famous where Yahusha throws up his street creds all the time. That's the 2 fingers pressed up with the thumb out. We see baby Messiah right there doing it. We even see Yahusha when he's confronted by a devil on the road. That'd be the temptation with the rocks becoming bread. You see him throwing up his street creds. And we see him coming out of the tomb here, throwing it up as well. Whenever I show this stuff, I inevitably have individuals who are trained that, everything is pagan and everything is the occult. And they will, point that out. My position is that the mysteries of heaven have been perverted, and that our controllers took over everything and they lied to us. To me, when I see this is the sign of the age of Pisces. All right, these are the 2 fish, the male and the female, in unison, side by side. That's the 2 fingers. People will come up with other stuff and they'll argue. For me, that's the age of Pisces. And we see it all through the artwork. It gets even more interesting, though, when we see Yahusha right there, or Messiah, throwing up the age of Pisces, his street creds, inside the Vesica piscis. All right, inside the fish, the 153 number, or the female organ, if you will. And of course, we see the same thing. That this is the whole thing with Gothic architecture. It is littered with the 153. It is everywhere. These the Vesica piscis. We see it just outside, inside, even outside here. You can go to Notre Dame. You can go wherever you want. You see this 153 number just set up in the architecture. And this is why I'm saying that these buildings are dripping with the feminine divine, the Ruach HaKodesh. It is literally an embodiment of heaven coming down to earth. Now, I do have to point this out. The Baphomet is Osher. People pointed this out. Oh, Baphomet's doing this. Well, let's just be clear here. This Baphomet image goes back to the 1800s. I keep showing this time and time again that we have been trained in a backwards order. You know how people are trained to read the Bible from the back to the front? Like you start with Paul's letters and everything has to be used as, like Paul's letters are used as a lens for everything else, thereby distorting what it actually means. Whereas if you start in the beginning and you read the Torah and then you recognize that the whole Bible is just commentary on the Torah, you have the prophets begging people to keep it because they were always doing away with it. And then, there was never a time, including at Mount Sinai, when people were not doing away with the Torah, right? That gives a very different perspective of the New Testament when you understand from the Bible from the beginning. It's the same thing with this. People look at recent outbreak of our controllers in the occult and what they're showing us and saying, see, it was always pagan. They were really, all these artists were really worshiping Baphomet. It's like, no. This image of Baphomet only goes back to the 1800s. It's brand new in history. The whole thing. The whole Satan got boobs thing. Oh, here's a deductive argument I tried to come up with. Jesus has two fingers pointing towards heaven. Baphomet has two fingers pointing toward heaven. Therefore, Jesus is Baphomet in disguise. Well, what I go into is that let's see, I'm trying to find where I find it, that the Templars and the medieval texts we have and stuff, they were called Baphoumerias. That's where the word Baphomet comes from, these Islamic mosques. And I haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet, and I really want to. I am really convinced that the original Islamic religion was what we would call Christian, most likely of an Edomite, not Edomite, I'm sorry. It's in the back of my head. I'm sorry, guys. But a flavor of the Nazarene. And that it becomes somewhere down the line that it became what it is today. That the Quran is not that old. It's been rewritten over and over again, and it is what it is. But what's interesting with these Baphoumerias is that we see all the same architecture, all the same design work. There's the octagonal baptistry, except it's not a baptistry, right? They got something built in there. That's where the engine went at some point. They probably went in and built that in more recently in history. Let's see. Here's cathedral castles. I talked about that for some reason. I'm sure it's good. All right, let's keep looking. Chateau de Chambord. I told you I'd talk about this. And what really got to me about Chateau de Chambord was the double helix staircase that goes all the way up. Now, we are told that Francis Crick and James Watson right there discovered the coiling double helix, the DNA molecule known as the double helix. Even though they conducted no DNA experiments of their own, they literally, I think it was over beer at a bar, they went and they came up with it. They just came up with it, guys. Like, clearly they were handed this technology, this knowledge. You guys know this. This stuff is being rolled out little by little. But the giveaway really is, of course, we know that goes way back. The Staff of Hermes right here. In my paper on the Anunnaki, they talk about this as well. What made mankind unique from what made eighth day man unique from sixth day man is the fact that he has the coiling double helix. That was a new introduction to eighth day man. Of course, we see this right here in this. I think this is this might be Sumerian right here, the spot. But as I was saying, oh yeah, here's Yaakov's ladder. You see the same thing spiraling up, really interesting. But as I was saying, you could see it right here. They actually designed this entire structure to represent a basically Yaakov's ladder, I believe. Now, they'll tell you that it was built as the Tower of Babel. Yeah, it's possible, maybe. I don't know if that's the case, but it is interesting. But it does go all the way up. And when you ascend this whole thing, which I have, on the very top ceiling right there, it goes through several floors, but you see all these like Nephilim creatures going up, and then like these kind of gargoyle-ish dragons up there representing, they're in the ethereal plane up there, you know, the prince of power of the air. They're up there, and then you break through the firmament and you go to the top, and then it's really beautiful up on top. And a lot of people suspect that the pyramids originally had a coiling double helix as well through the capstone. That's just speculation. We really don't know. It would be interesting if it did. And there's, of course, a picture of it there. You can see that it was never completed, that it was originally designed to look like New Jerusalem. And, you know, the official narrative with a lot of these is that the guy building it went insane, ran out of money, whatever. We don't really know. We don't really know what happened, but it is clear that it was never completed. You know, that it was destroyed, I don't really know. All right, this is where I get, again, really excited. I hope you guys are enjoying this tonight. I hope this is informative for you guys. I hope this is kind of putting a lot of the research together. The Pilgrim's Path travels through the Millennial Kingdom. And as I mentioned earlier tonight, that it came to, I was just buying up all these books on the Middle Ages and trying to read what all the historians say are the commonalities. And the top 2 or 3 commonalities I saw was people living in their own poo because they had no plumbing. Apparently, people didn't really live to be older than 30 or 40, and they were horrible parents. They were very apathetic towards their children, and they went on pilgrimages. The first 2 are BS. This one I think is legitimately true. We're seeing that all over, and that ties in, of course, with Sukkot. I actually I didn't want to give the name of the lady I'm quoting from here. She was a very fine researcher, nice history books. I didn't want to throw her under the bus, but I just quoted from her to show what the typical position is, you know, the propaganda that we're all fed, that even she believed. So this is what it says in Zechariah chapter 14. And like I said, this is the number one, really the top description we have. Aside from ruling as kings and priests with Mashiach, this is the top description we have of the millennial kingdom. And it says, then all the survivors from the nations that came against Jerusalem will go up year after year to worship the king, Yahweh Sevaoth, and to celebrate the feast of Sukkot. That's the Feast of Tabernacles. And should any of the families of the earth not go up to Jerusalem to worship the king, Yahweh Sevaoth, then the rain will not fall on them. And the family of Mitzrayim will not go up and enter in, then the rain will not fall on them. This will be the plague with which Yahweh strikes the nations who do not go up to celebrate the Feast of Sukkot. This will be the punishment of Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is Egypt. And all the nations that do not go up to celebrate the Feast of Sukkot. In my following book, when I finish it, The End of the Millennial Kingdom, I'm going to be talking about this and showing the Black Plague and other things like that came at the end that just wrecked the world. It was this curse that when people were rebelling against the Torah, they were rebelling against the commands, and it never ends well for people when that happens. People always wonder, why did it come to an end? Because the king had laws and people, you know, they broke the laws. You know, they might have been going with the very birth of the Protestant Reformation. You know, grace, we all got grace. You know, the five solas, right? Faith alone, right? No works whatsoever. You do any works. That's not what you're supposed to be doing right now. Don't do anything. Don't do any work, because if you do, you're going to dishonor the king. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Like that in no way translates to on earth as it in heaven. No king on this earth wants you just to have faith in him and not do anything and just sit on your butt and just transgress him all the time. There is not a kingdom in the world that operates that way, which is just so weird. Anyways, that's the big indicator right there. And that's what we see going around all around the world. I covered that a little bit. This Amos right here, behold, the days are coming, declares Yahweh Elohim, when I will send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread or a thirst for water, but a famine of hearing the words of Yahweh. Now, this has been commented upon a lot by the Mandela effect crowd. They say that, oh, this is a prophecy of the coming Mandela effect. No, it is not. This is not a prophecy of the Mandela effect. This is the entire theme of Amos, of all these minor prophets, is rebellion against the Torah, the instructions in righteous living. Every single one of them. All right. So this famine that is coming on a lack of hearing the words of Yahuwah is because people are literally in the dark right now and they don't get it. They don't get, like, the entire Bible is just telling you to be obedient. And they're like, no, 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 I don't know. That's can't be true. It can't be what it says. Anybody who says that is, they're twisting the Bible. The Bible, it's, they wrote this whole Bible just to tell you to not do it. That it's like the most idiotic view and people don't even have an argument to stand on at this point. They just come up with stuff and nothing sticks. This is the famine. They are living that famine right now based on the disobedience of their fathers and their disobedience. Of course, the great news is that we can all repent and we are given grace. And we can, repent of the sins of our fathers as well. All right. So let's start looking at some of these maps here. This is, in a lot of these medieval maps, I've come to find that my favorite maps are the ones where they're not trying to be, these medieval maps, they're not trying to be specific with the actual geography. They're just giving more of a theological approach. And in all of these, we see Jerusalem in the center of the earth. We see Africa, Asia, and Europe spreading out from it. It's kind of funny. England is off over there on its own. It's not a part of this, this clover, this Trinitarian shape. And then, of course, you see America, interestingly enough, way out over here on its own. It was not thought to be included. This is called the Cloverleaf Map, 1581. Okay, without going into all of that. This one actually gets more interesting. Once again, you see Jerusalem in the center of the world. And what do you see around it? You see these 12 gates. You see the zodiac. And in a lot of these maps, if you look over here to the right, you're going to see the outer darkness people, the Gog Magog people. A lot of times maps will be more specific and they'll show them up in the Tartaria region, where Tartaria exploded during the Enlightenment. It seems to be an explosion of the Gog Magog people right there above the Black Sea, that whole region. Also where the children of Ashkenaz currently have come from, interestingly enough. So according to, let's see, this right here. Oh, here's a passage from Revelation, and it had a wall great and high and had 12 gates, and at the gates, 12 angels. So this is talking about renewed Jerusalem. So this is where I'm talking about that we see two types of renewed Jerusalem. We see a brick and mortar city, but we also see a city as a people. And I believe that this map here is telling us that the earth itself is New Jerusalem having come down. These would be the 12 gates that we see right here. I could talk more about the 12 gates, but this comes from the book of Enoch, and he says the same thing in the zodiac. 12 gates I beheld in heaven at the extremities of the earth, which we see on this map. And they tell us, the book of Enoch didn't exist then, but this amazingly matches up with Enoch, through which the sun, moon, stars, and all the works of heaven proceed at their rising and their setting. So these are the different models that, people try to make New Jerusalem out. There's the cube shape. I went for that for a time. Other people go for the pyramid shape. Of course, there's the globe earth shape that got blown up there in Star Wars with the Death Star. But interesting enough, this is the way Zechariah describes Jerusalem of the millennial kingdom. And said unto him, run, speak to this young man, saying, Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns without walls for the multitude of men and cattle therein. For I, saith Yahuwah, will be unto her a wall of fire round about, and will be the glory in the midst of her. So what is this describing? I came up with this here on AI. I kind of think that this is what it's describing. In my opinion, it's not saying that there wouldn't be walls. There's good reasons for walls. We get into that with the star forts and stuff, and they had a purpose. What it's saying is that it would be all these different cities spread about, these little sanctuaries, right? These little menorahs spread out all over the earth. And I imagine, roads, and you have the arches there and cattle and stuff. And what is this fire that it's talking about as the wall? Well, we get this on this map down here. What is this? This is a passage from Gospel of Luke 3:16. He will baptize you with the Ruach HaKodesh and fire. John 3:3 says, Yahushua answered and said unto him, verily, verily, I say unto you, except a man be born from above, he cannot see the kingdom of Allah. That's really interesting, right? So the idea is that I've asked the question, during the millennial kingdom, could people have been living in the kingdom and not experience the kingdom? And some of you are gonna be like, what? Well, the thing is that this is where the preterists actually, I believe, get it right, that the kingdom is always within. It's within. So even if you have a kingdom of manifesting upon the earth, there are going to be some people transgressing and not interested, choosing to sin, and the kingdom will not be within. It will be with it. It will just be this material outside, and it may not mean the same thing to them. And this is what he says right here. So I don't think this rule changes. Except a man be born from above, he cannot see the kingdom of Allah. Gospel of Philip said, those who say that Adonai, oh yeah, I went over that. I went over that at the beginning of this video. I don't need to go over it again. Okay, let's look at this. I had a, oh, here it is right here. So here you see the head up here. This would be Yahusha's head, and you see it kind of almost comically, his hands coming out here, and his feet are at the very bottom of this. And of course, they're pierced. So this is telling you, illustrating for you that he is the body and the people are his church. Well, this is interestingly in map of the world. It's telling you that the kingdom is here. He is king of the world. In the middle is New Jerusalem right here. And it's kind of a big square city, which is kind of interesting right there. Though I'm of the opinion that this is all describing New Jerusalem. If you look over here on the left, you can see the fire that is keeping the bad people out. There's, I guess, people outside the kingdom over there. You see some cannibals over there. And over here on the right as well, you see the Gog and Magog people. They're kind of these wild men, naked. And the speculation is, was the Great Wall of China built to keep them out? Is that Alexander the Great's wall? I know that Alexander the Great's wall was supposed to be over there by the Black Sea, just north of Armenia, the kingdom of Armenia. That's what we're told, but maybe that's not the whole truth, right? So, but anyways, this fire would be, of course, the Ruach HaKodesh, keeping them out into the outer darkness. And the great thing about this map is that in a lot of these maps, you actually see Noah's Ark. I've commented upon this. A lot of people really didn't like this. I was really surprised they didn't get excited about this. That map after map after map, we see that Noah's Ark was a pilgrimage destination. I'll go into that really quickly with you guys. This is another map I really like. This is of France, and this is a map of the different cathedrals. These cathedrals would be built. They could be 20 miles away or 100 miles away. But interestingly enough, that every 20 miles on these routes, they would have monasteries, nunneries, friaries, whatever you wanted to call them. And they were all designed around pilgrims. And so people would take these paths, and you would walk 20 miles, and you would stay for free to one of the convents or whatever, and they would take care of you. They would minister to you, and you went on, and you just kept going on and on and on and on until you reached your destination. So I really like that map there. Here's one of the, this is one of the definitions of the kingdom according to Matthew. Yahusha is talking here, and it says he went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the bezorah of the kingdom and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. Verse 10, chapter 10 down here, it says, and when verse 1, and when he had called into him his 12 Talmudim, that would be his disciples, he gave them power against unclean ruach to cast them out and to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of disease. And that was, of course, the big attraction too, we're told, of the pilgrimage, that they would go to these places and be healed. Here's a lot of people ask me about the different maps. You guys have, I'm sure, researched them as well. What is north, east, south, and west in these maps? This map here, it is flipped 90 degrees. Looks like this is a map of England and Scotland, and so the west of this map should be north, right? The west is actually northern Scotland over there, and for whatever reason, the map maker flipped it. Now, the big question is did they really think direction was different? Are we going to see a northeast and south different, or they just had different priorities when they made these maps? I don't really know. But this map right here is a map of the Pilgrim Road in England. And you could just see these lane lines still exist to this day. You can go to England, Scotland and stuff, and you could, in Spain, France, and you could just see these roads that were not designed for carriages, anything else. People would walk them. and they would walk to all these different destinations. Right there, that big city, that's London right there. And here's the map from Pilgrim's Progress. And so this gives, of course, new meaning to John Bunyan. John Bunyan is writing in the was it the 15 or the 1600s, and he's talking about these pilgrims paths. He probably had one right out of his window that he could look at and watch the pilgrims walk by. But again, it gives this whole new definition or perspective to the celestial city that they were walking towards on their journey. What is this here? Is this this is Santiago. This is the big destination in Spain. It's one of the number one destinations. And Santiago, and so here is where I show you an example of a dome that is medieval. That it was not Enlightenment era. They did have their domes as well. And this is Santiago is accredited to Yaakov or James, and this would be James, the son of Zebedee, the brother of Yochanan. Okay, so this is not James, the brother of Yahusha. And this is what I had started out saying in this video, that it seems like all these different cathedrals have their patron saint. That's what the Roman Catholic Church tells us, right? Or the Orthodox Church, they have these patron saints and they have these feast days that we were supposed to adhere to. But my position is that these feast days may be left over from those who were actually all different saints throughout the Bible, as well as after the Bible and the in intervening years, that were resurrected saints that were actually ruling from these places, healing the nations, right? That is their wealth, their treasure, not gold. It was actually healing the nations. And so we have to ask ourselves this question, that if we really want to be kingdom saints into eternity, what is our priority? You know, what are we pursuing in this world? Are we pursuing the health of others? Because I believe that is what a kingdom saint will do. So at Santiago, one of the things I learned was, when you look at all this medieval artwork, you see this shell right here. And it's usually upside down. If it is upside down, let's see if I get this right. If it is upside down, it means that they have already visited. And this guy has like 4 over here, which tells us that he has visited like 4 different times. He's a serial repeat visitor. And this was like the original bumper sticker that you would put on cars. Like you would wear this shell and people go, "Oh, you've been to Santiago." The interesting thing about the scallop shell is that, of course, we see Shell gas station here. It lives on. If you're walking on these ancient pilgrim paths through Spain, you could see the shell is always pointing in the direction of the place. But the shell is also a representation of resurrection. Now, over here, the Birth of Venus, this is a Renaissance painting in which they were literally taking Greek paganism and mixing it in with the Bible, with something you don't see in the Middle Age artwork. But I put that there just to show the idea that the shell is a representation of the resurrection. And we must ask ourselves, were these people experiencing resurrection in a certain way or manner, whether within or without? Moving on, we go back here to Noah's Ark. This is the map I showed you, where you can see the fire right here, telling us that Noah's Ark is kind of on the extremities of the kingdom, which it is in Armenia. Armenia is right over there. The Ron White Ark site, which I know I'm not supposed to believe in. I'm supposed to believe it's like, Nephilim or whatever, because it, discredits a lot of the research being put out there that, Israel is not the land or whatever. But it is perfect location, and it is right there over by the Black Sea, that whole area, kind of an upper portion of the Middle East that borders, Tartary and all that region. It's right where we see it on multiple maps, including this one right here. Yeah, it's on this map right here. I will point out this this big, giant, tall woman over here. I'll comment on her in just a moment. I guess I won't. Actually, this is that is, of course, Lot's wife, telling us that Lot's wife was known as a pilgrimage destination back during the medieval period. And so I go into the passages from Yasher and others that talk about how she is standing there to that day. And my position is that this is literally Lot's wife right here. She's standing on the Jordan side, overlooking the Dead Sea. She would be if she was a real living woman, she would be a 9-footer. I think that's an actual like jar or something on top of her head. Like she's carrying her belongings with her just on top. Maybe it's not a jar, but like she's carrying her belongings out, right? And she turns eloquently with her stuff on top of her head, and she's turned into a pillar of salt. You can see it right here. And she's of course a giant, and it looks like she's on top of a mountain, just like you see that well. I won't go into all these passages. Another great map. Right here again, you can see Noah's Ark placed exactly where it's supposed to be, right where we see it with the Ron Wyatt site. And this map actually shows Tartaria. Now, this one is actually flipped upside down, interestingly enough, where north is down at the bottom, south is up on top. So the continent up here is Africa. But here, you see, again, they always put Jerusalem right where it is in historical Israel today. My only criticism with these maps is if for those who are saying that Israel is not the historical land, which is fine, people are free to their opinion. They could please investigate this and give me a position to fall back on if Israel proves not to be the land. But all these maps show the land we know today as Israel with all the biblical sites, and they show Tartaria in there too. And so people go, oh, there's Tartaria, but then you're supposed to shun Israel. It's like, well, wait a second. If that's not really Israel and Jerusalem, as they say, then how do you know that's Tartaria? I don't know. That's just my criticism right there. Sorry if I lost some subscribers. Here's another map right here. This is the Urbano Monte map, which you guys know I love. Noah's Ark right there. Running out of time, so I'm just gonna. I'm only halfway through this. What a shame. See what I can get through. Okay, so that's my proposal for the Ark site. The Ron Wyatt really did discover it, and this just really triggered people. I was really surprised when I get this. I thought people would be all excited to look at the medieval maps, and it lines up. And here you see the both Byzantine and Crusader knight signs were there. They were visiting it. And my whole point here was that we see no record of this at all. It's been scrubbed. And yet we have physical, tangible evidence that there was Byzantine and Crusader knights, what we call Crusader knights, visiting it. And we see it on the maps. And yet the books have been scrubbed. Why is that? Why was it not discovered again until the 1970s? All right. And one last thing, we see the altar, the unhewn stone that the person who landed in that boat built. This lines right up with Noah. Now you see this man here who looks like Alan Grant from Jurassic Park, and I don't know his name. I just pulled this off the internet, but it's a great illustration because assuming this guy is like 6 foot even, I mean, we're looking at an altar that is 12 by 12 by 12. That step you see right there is actually measures 3 feet high. There's only one step. It's actually an ascending platform that would have been used to bring up animals for the sacrifice up on top. And they could see there was drainage and everything up there where the animals were sacrificed. But the idea is that if Lot's wife was 9 feet, it appears that this man was anywhere from 15 to 30 feet, which actually goes in with a lot of research. That Noah was what we would call today a giant. Now, again, some people are like, "What? That's not true. He wasn't a giant." Well, actually, the people, Adam would have been a massive giant to us. So when it says that there were giants in the earth in those days, yeah, we're talking about giants that were much larger than the actual patriarchs. But the patriarchs were still very large people. And so if Noah was anywhere from 15 to 30 feet, by the time you get, I don't know how big Lot was. I mean, usually men are bigger than women, right? So if Lot's wife was 9 feet, maybe he was a 12 footer or a 10 footer. 10 feet. I don't really know. But we're seeing that each generation kind of gradually got smaller and smaller until you get to the Exodus generation when they were probably in the 5 foot range, like we have today, kind of settled. All right, next section, we have Labyrinths, seeking the kingdom of heaven within. And this goes back time and time again. Everyone's looking for the bones of the exterior kingdom, and we need to remember that the very architecture itself, even though it declares that the kingdom of heaven is on the earth, it was always pointing to the kingdom within. And that's the whole point of a labyrinth. What is the difference between a labyrinth and a maze? Well, I want to point out that labyrinths are unique medieval pieces of work. We're not talking about the ancient labyrinths of the Minotaur. The ancient mazes of the Minotaur, the labyrinth, and all that, they were made to bring you in, confuse you, disorient you, just like the rat race today, right? The world is built by controllers like a maze. That is not what labyrinths have. No dead ends. You can see where you enter it right here, and you just follow it until it could be a little disorienting, which is a little intended to, space perception and stuff. But you would go on this and on a prayer walk, maybe a singing walk, maybe there's music playing, and you're entering into the mandala, into the middle. So here's some examples of the difference between a labyrinth over here on the left and a maze on the right with its many dead ends. And so these would be on the floor of these cathedrals. We have a few survivors left. And you would just look up at the beautiful, awe-inspiring ceilings and just everything, the cloisters, the arches, just the row-shaped window, just really beautiful to behold. I mean, nowadays you see in these churches, they don't even know what to do with them. They're just putting chairs over them. And they clearly, I mean, that kind of helps tell you too that the way they design these cathedrals now, or tell you they weren't designed that way originally. I don't think that they just had all these chairs where they would go and sit in there and stare at someone giving a sermon. I don't think they were built that way. And I feel like this gives it away. Why would they have a labyrinth there that you couldn't even use because of all the laymen sitting in there? All right, so a few things to notice here. We see this is the most famous one. Was it the Chartres labyrinth? And I mispronounce all French words. I'm sorry. It's my dream to live in France someday, and I'll still, to the end of my days, mispronounce words. A few things to notice here. You see the four quarters of the earth. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's of course represented by the zodiac, 4 seasons, the summer solstice and equinoxes. You see the cross right here, which of course I like to refer to as a tav. That's Messiah's calling card. There are 11 circuits counted from the outside to the center, with the middle right here making it the 12. And of course, in the middle, you see these 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a 7th in the center. Kind of interesting. It's a rosette. And it's all made up to be sacred geometry. Here's another example one right here. So here's some of the passages that maybe they would read as they would go through this. Well, this one comes up from Isaiah 30. Whether you turn to the right or the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." As in the way. The way, guys, the way is always the Father's instructions in righteous living. You're either walking with Yah according to his path, or contrary to him, which means he would be walking contrary to you if you are not walking according to the way. That's all throughout the Tanakh as well, the Old Testament. It's not just a New Testament concept. You make known to me the path of life. You will find me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. Psalm 16:10. In their hearts, humans plan their course, but Yahweh establishes their steps. Proverbs 16:9. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. John 14:6. And of course, the way, the truth, and the life is the Torah, the Torah, the Torah. I am the Torah, the Torah, the Torah. You can just, everything he says, everything Messiah says is cross-referenced with the Old Testament. He's the word, right? So he's just quoting the very words that he put down. For we walk by faith, not by sight. 2 Corinthians 5:7. Or how about this one right here? Matthew 6:9 through 10. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Those are all potential prayers that would be prayed, memorized as they go through the labyrinth, working their way into it. I actually found it really beautiful researching the labyrinth. I recommend, if you haven't listened to that presentation or haven't read that for yourself, go give the research a read. It's really beautiful. I can't wait to do a labyrinth myself. I've never done one. I'm not going to go over the labyrinth from Jim Henson. Cute story, cute and dark. Total contrast with what we see in the labyrinth. Okay. Next section. Night moves, the lost dance of the millennial kingdom. This ties in with Sukkot, of course. And so here's what we know. We know that there was a medieval dance called the carol or the rondeau. It was a circular dance. The first, we know that it existed all through the Middle Ages. The first detailed description, however, does not arrive until the Renaissance. And we do not have any surviving lyrics or any surviving songs. What is going on? How is something that we know was worldwide, all across the kingdom, it no longer exists? Why, I detect a conspiracy right there. So there you can see no surviving lyrics or music for the carol have been identified. Here's some illustrations of it here. One of the things I've noted is that we see people of all walks of life. The rondeau or the carol was a circle. They would walk in a circle, probably representing the zodiac. And you see kings and, if you want to call them, peasants, and knights and ladies, people of all different walks of life. They're all equals in this. And this is very likely where Arthurian literature got the round table. I actually think this predated the Arthurian literature, right? So they're just copying the rondeau, this idea that we see here. This is interesting because we even see angels mixing in with the dance. What is that telling us right there? You know, one of my theories with the resurrected, and I've addressed this a few times, was actually talked about by J.R.R. Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings. And when Frodo would slip on the ring, he would go into this perception of the spiritual realm. He could see this, what people really truly look like in the spiritual realm around him. So the ring wraiths, which nobody could see, he could see these wicked, evil-looking creatures. But some of the elves who came from the undying blessed lands, the hidden wilderness, I believe is the greater realm, and that's a whole book that I want to do a similar series like this on. He would see that they are these gloriously illuminated beings. But when you took off the ring and you enter back in the material realm, they just look like normal people. And so I actually wondered that if some of the resurrected saints are actually in front of us in the artwork. Like the Mona Lisa, right? I know the Mona Lisa is probably, drag, right? I've seen those conspiracies. But just the Mona Lisa types, right? Just these people just staring at you, just these images of ladies and men. What if they are actually gloriously illuminated beings resurrected, but we are seeing their portrait in the material realm as people saw them? So something to think about with that angel there. Here's another one, talk about the hidden wilderness. We see the same carol happening in paradise, in the afterlife. And some of these are saints. They're telling us that they are either resurrected or they're dead or whatever. And some of these don't have the halos around them, and they have crowns. Look at this; they have crowns, kings and queens. And are they? I don't know. Are they going to the tree of life, pulling the leaves, bringing back for the nations? And are they having a dance there with the angels? These two, I think, are my favorite. The one on the left is my absolute favorite. We're actually seeing these feminine, almost these angelic women going around the zodiac. You see the sun in the middle there, and they're going around in a circle. And we don't see many female angels, right? And I have long held the position that there are female angels. There are masculine. I don't believe that they're all asexual and that sex doesn't exist. And when you die, you cease to be a male or female, and like the modern gender wars, right? Which, if that's the case, then it's like, what does any of the gender wars matter? What does it matter if you're male or female? Because you're just going to become all the same, right? I don't hold to that. I think that there is distinctly something that is masculine and feminine. And when we see the marriage of Ruakoth, the blending together of male and female, it's not like the female will cease to exist. She'll be sucked in and absorbed by the man. Oh, sorry, I lost my wife. She's become a part of me now. It's not going to be like that. There's going to be an echad, like we see with the father and the son, an echad between the man and the woman eternally, if we can do it right. And that's a whole teaching in the book of the Nazarene. Nevertheless, heaven is a patriarchal society, right? There is a monarch. There is a motherhood, but the patriarchy is in the sense that, like, the masculine, the male angels, they're the ones that go off and fight wars. They go on missions, right? They go down to the earth, to the unclean realm. They leave their ladies behind. They leave their ladies behind to do their duties. And that's one of the things you read in Sirach, where the Holy Spirit, or wisdom, Chokmah, she's like setting the table, and she has her servants, and she's getting the finest wine and the meat out. She is doing these homemaker duties. And that's what the women do. But in this case here, we see women dancing a rondeau or a carol, coming down to celebrate the birth of Mashiach. I think I love this. I love this a lot. Like, they're just coming down. They can't contain themselves. And of course, they represent, of course, the zodiac as well. Another rondeau. And these talk about passages. Again, for lack of time, I'm not going to go through all of these. But here are modern examples of this circle dance that have survived all over the world. And you can pick here. There's let's see, there's Slavic, Russian, Greek, Bulgarian, Yiddish, which that's of course Jewish. And the Jewish one is really, really interesting. How the bride and groom are in the middle, and you see multiple layers of it. And they can be going in opposite directions too. I want to actually have, I want to add to this eventually what Plato talked about, where the stars go in two directions. We know this with the northern and southern hemisphere. They're all going around the firmament. Of course, Plato believed in the firmament, right? And they're going one way in the north, and the other way in the south, counterclockwise. And that's, again, tying us in when you see the two layers of the dance that is tying in with the north and the south, the stars. And of course, I love this here. This is on the tombstone, I believe, of a lady. She danced her way into her funeral because she loved it so much that she had it put onto her tombstone, which I think is kind of fun. Next section, Maypole, Mystery of the Maypole. This, of course, ties in with the rondeau. I don't believe this is pagan. I went through this whole thing here where even some historian, these scholars and stuff, they're just like, yeah, everybody wants to, look back and just villainize everything. And I've learned through this process that no, not everything. If something has been villainized, it's because our controllers are doing it. It's because the pearls have been cast before the swine. And so we're picking up these pearls in the mud as the swine are stepping on it. The pigs, the unclean animals, are stepping on it. And we're going, see, this is pagan. See, this needs to be done away with. It's like, no, the mysteries of heaven have been stomped upon. This is what Messiah warned against. All right. It doesn't mean that something is to be done away with. Enough on that. But we see this all over the world. And I talked about how this ties in with the Axis Mundi, the Tree of Life, the Four Seasons, the swastika. There's that comes into it. All right. And also the course of the on the moon map right here. This is something I referred to a lot. And the 26,000 years, 25,800 years it takes for the magnetic north to make theoretically a complete circle all the way around this realm. And so the sun and the moon will move around magnetic north, and they're going to make a journey around the whole earth here. And so this is where we're at right now in history. You can see our side of the realm right here. And then of course, this would be like, several thousand years from now, theoretically, it's going to be over here in what I call the hidden wilderness. So basically, it all ties in with that. There's just so much that goes into it. Okay, I talked about the Green Man last week. Not going over that again. And I noticed that the Green Man was a struggle. I took you guys through this, and I started from now when I went back in time, and I showed how our controllers, that the Green Man is very, very new in pagan culture. And you see him in Burning Man, and the Wiccan culture is into him. The trannies are into him. He's at Scarborough Fair. They have all these different things. And looking at that, we could all say, oh yeah, he's a ancient pagan deity, and he's always been around. No, he hasn't. He's only been around like 40 years. And it's our controllers taking him over and transforming him into something, which my whole challenge was, instead of looking at it from a modern sense and looking back in time, how about we look at the Green Man as the medievalist looked at him? The first thing we need to do is get rid of the Green Man, because people were coming in the comments saying, oh, well, he's green, and green adds up to, 666 or this or that, and all, all these different things. And, look at, the green, this, and that. It's like, no, first of all, get rid of the Green Man. That is a term that was coined less than 100 years ago. Nobody called him the Green Man in history. He was not the Green Man. You see what I'm saying? We have to shed those pounds to be able to see him as the medievalist saw him. Now I'm working on a paper right now. I won't tell you what it is because I don't want someone to beat me to it. But one of the points I'm going to make is that as I'm digging into medieval this artwork and commentary and whatever writings I can, that kind of stuff, I'm finding that they had this idea that um, all of creation, all animals, all creation, higher form and lower form, higher than us being the angels, spirits, they were all redeemable, and they were all created to create a message to teach us about the kingdom. And they saw that Messiah had conquered the whole earth, and they saw that everything was redeemable. And so for them, they weren't thinking, I believe the millennial kingdom saints were not thinking in terms of what is, now hear me out on this. They weren't thinking in terms of what is pagan and not. Now, in today's environment, we're all affected by what I would call the Nephilim research. And what Nephilim research has done is said that, okay, like, how like you're in Sunday school and there's like two answers. It's either Jesus or Satan, right? Or angels or demons. Well, it's all like Nephilim, right? So if I were to say to you, if I would hold up these cards, like a centaur, how many would say Nephilim? If I held up a mermaid, people go, oh, that's Nephilim, right? Everything is Nephilim. Everything is pagan. And I've watched this, the song in the Lego movie, Everything is Awesome. Just take out the word awesome, put pagan in there, because I see people go around online, everything is pagan, And when you do that, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble, because then if the theory is that everything out there that is pagan, that if somebody believes something that can be credited as pagan, you're not supposed to believe it. I've seen people get into problems because then you start looking into the killings of the gods and the seasons and the mysteries and things like that, and people are like, OMG, the Bible, the whole Passover event, all that stuff, it's just telling another pagan story. Or, oh yeah, Yahusha, he dies and goes to Sheol and resurrects. Oh, that's so pagan. Bacchus already did that. Dionysus, Semiramis, they all did this before, right? And so when you're looking at quote unquote paganism, just because another culture told it first doesn't mean that it's not stolen from a mystery of heaven. All right. And this is where we all need, I've said this 100 times now, and I will spend the rest of my life saying this. This is why we need to read the book of Enoch and come to appreciate what happened with the Watchers. The Watchers, they spread the mysteries of heaven. Now, they cast the pearl before swine. They weren't supposed to do that. And as Yah said, they were worthless mysteries. They did not teach his instructions in righteous living as they were supposed to. But think about one of the things they introduced, the sword. They introduced the sword. Now, we know that the sword came from heaven because it appeared in Genesis chapter 3, a flaming sword. They introduced the sword to mankind. The sword was used to kill people. It was a horrible introduction to the world. Yet, is it sin to own a sword? Are you a pagan if you own a sword? No, you're not a pagan if you own a sword. Just know that it was the Watchers that introduced it. You own a sword only because the Watchers brought it to you. You see what I'm saying? So just because something is distributed in the different mystery religions and you have all these controllers holding controlled opposition, they're taking these mysteries and holding up to their bosom and saying, this is mine. That doesn't mean that it's untrue. And I'm not telling you to follow other religions. I believe that the Bible is true. I believe it is the true word of Yah, and I want to be in a covenant. I want him to be my Allah Hayam. Do you see what I'm saying in here? That the medievalists, they were looking at the world as completely conquered by Mashiach. And they, if there are things that maybe similarities, like, oh, look, there's a green man and he's got leaves on his face, and you find some, other, like, leaves aren't evil, guys. Like Adam and Eve, you see all the illustrations with them with fig leaves, right? And of course that ties in, of course, with Adam. As I show the idea of the green man. And I keep using that word green man. I shouldn't be saying green man. But the whole idea of him is that he is Adam. That I showed you texts. These are in surviving texts. And what I had all these people coming back at me, just making stuff. I'm like, show me a text. Where are you saying it's this deity or that deity? You're using your imagination right now. Show me a text, because I put a big emphasis on this. I want to read it in books. I want to see it and line it up, and it makes perfect sense. The seeds that came from paradise, from the tree of mercy, which was created in oil mercy. It was an olive tree. And interestingly enough, where Messiah was crucified was surrounded by olive trees. We have the Mount of Olives. And we know that in 70 AD, the Romans cut those down and built bridges with them and so on and so forth to destroy Jerusalem. But it was surrounded by olive trees. And so the idea is that he was probably hung on an olive tree, or maybe they cut it down to make a cross, depending on how you view the cross, whether he was hung on a tree or a chopped down tree. But anyways, there you go. All right. Sorry for that rant. And here's, of course, an illustration here where, I'm not telling you the green man is Jesus, but this person right here said it. I'm just the messenger, right? So, don't accuse me of saying that. I'm just pointing that this person here says that the man in the shroud was the green man. They're saying that he is second Adam, right? The first Adam was the green man, and he is the second green man. All right. Let's see what else I have in here before I close shop for the night. Oh, chess in the Millennial Kingdom. This one was a lot of fun. Of course, the Millennial Kingdom, all the architecture is all about duality, which is what chess is. I'll point out some interesting little facts about chess if you haven't seen this presentation. Of course, I always have to bring up Manly P. Hall and in these instances of Freemasons, because if I don't, people will quote from him. He was really big on chess. Chess is a Masonic thing. My whole position is, yes, well, the Masons, they were the inheritors. They basically took the pearls and they made them their own, even by their own confession. I mean, they were an Enlightenment thing. All right, so let me look at a few things here. A knight. I wanted to talk to you about knights tonight, the esoteric quality of a knight. So Manly P. Hall, he refers to the knight as vitality and then leaves it at that, expecting our imagination to fill in the rest. Now, I much prefer the word chivalry, which outlines the moral conduct of a knight. Come to think of it, the very word chivalry comes from the French chevalier and literally means knight or horseman. So isn't it interesting that the knight chess piece is represented by a horse? Where would the knight be without his horse? On an esoteric level, it is the horse which represents the moral body, complete with its associated energies and emotions, aka the vitality which Manly described. So he was right on with that. While the horseman embodies the higher divine self, which must master the body or else be muted by it. And it reads our theory and literature. It's all about that, the chivalry process, where the knight is always trying to master his impulses and become perfected, as we see with the Grail Quest. Oh, and one more thing, I would be negligent to pass up on the movement of the knight, which is L-shaped. The Lodge brothers are all over that one with its square and compass symbology. But as I point out too, that the L shape actually points out that the earth is flat, that it's a motionless plane. So the idea is that the knights were moving about they were free to move about the world in their L shape. All right. I'm trying to rush through this now and give you guys a complete kind of view of this. Interesting enough about I talk about how you can make it a 3D and do all different really cool stuff with chessboards, but there are 28 squares around it. And this is throwing out you can't say Lunar Sabbath crowd that I never throw you guys a bone. You can count the moon cycles, the first day, the 8th day, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th, which is when the Lunar Sabbath crowd would say you never have a Sabbath except on those days. So can't say I didn't throw you a bone. I don't think that this says the Sabbath, but I do think that it very well could calculate the moon. And there's just a lot of fascinating stuff about the chessboard. It's very esoteric. And my position on chess is that it was created by just brilliant minds. I mean, imagine playing with Bobby Fischer, right? The thing about chess is that I mean, I can only think a few moves ahead at most, and not even in very many variations. I'm giving myself away. So some of you really good people in chess can come play me. I love playing chess. I love it. But the thing about chess, imagine if you were able to play with someone who were hundreds of moves ahead of you and knew all the different variations. Like, you wouldn't stand a chance. Like, chess, in my opinion, was created by very divine higher beings. Mary Magdalene and the mandala. And this goes into this whole section talks about the rose windows and how, let me just talk about this really quickly. The very word mandala is of Sanskrit origin and translates to mean circle or center. As advocates of the metaphysical significance of geometric patterns and numbers, the Pythagoreans, remember when we talked about them earlier tonight, saw the circle as particularly sacred. In this way, you can think of a mandala as a geometric configuration of symbols which establishes sacred spaces, allowing its practitioners and adepts to achieve their spiritual goals. The circle is a representation of unmanifest unity where all cosmic opposites reside. It encourages one's spiritual journey from the outside of oneself inward, from the macro to the micro universe, to the kingdom within. Now, why does Mary Magdalene play a part in this? Well, the end of her story, I actually do have an actual ancient text which actually does say, and I haven't given a presentation on this yet, it actually does say that when Yahusha appeared over Jerusalem in 70 AD, that Mary Magdalene was at his side, that she was seen. So some of you may not like that, but it lines up with everything I've been looking at. So to the end of it, of course, I believe that she is the disciple whom he loved, who he said to Peter that I will come back to her. As the bridegroom is coming back for his bride, he literally came back for her. And she went off to France to this cave where she spent the rest of her days. And this cave itself is a type of mandala. And I won't go through all this again. I actually quote from the Empire Strikes Back here and talking about the cave. So if you haven't read that, go read it, because I found something in there that was really interesting. So here's all this artwork here on Mary Magdalene. There is amazing amount of artwork on Mary Magdalene. There is probably more artwork on Mary Magdalene than probably any other New Testament figure outside of Mary the Mother and Yahushua HaMashiach. There is so much on her. People don't even realize how important she was during the Middle Ages as well as the Enlightenment. And there are only a couple of figures. There are only three in the New Testament figures, aside from Messiah, who I have found that claim they ascended to heaven. One was Mary the Mother, one was Mary Magdalene, the other was John, or Yochanan, the writer of Revelation. He ascended as well. And by the way, the same text that I have that Mary Magdalene appeared over Jerusalem talks about how Yochanan ascended up to heaven as well. But she was, apparently fed by angels every day, and she would go into this trance, and I talk about all that and how this actually ties in with the depiction of Mary Magdalene in this cave is how the cathedrals were built. Like you're entering a cave, you're entering into this mandala where, you kind of anything can become possible type of thing, and entering the space and creating something out of it. So again, not going through all that for lack of time tonight. There's just more passages of her. Pictures of her. Oh, look, I even quote from Pseudo Dionysius again. That guy comes up a lot in medieval theology, particularly as it pertains to the cathedrals. I should stress that. All right, what's next? Oh, wow, we're not going to have time for this tonight. The interior castle and the matrix and the 7 degrees of mystery initiation. Now, this woman, she was a Spaniard. Her name is Teresa of Avila. I was just blown away when I'm digging through all this medieval literature and I read her book and I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. I had written this paper back in 2018 about the 7 steps of initiation into the mystery religions as told through the Matrix. And of course, there's your trannies right there, Lana and Lily. They used to be the Wachowski brothers. Now they're the sisters. They made the full transition. But I quickly... so I wrote this whole paper on how the Matrix movie shows the 7 steps of initiation to of the mystery religions, which, to achieve a level 7, most people never even make it to level 3. But to make it to a level 7, he's like a flying watcher at the end of it, right? And he goes up to the 8th, 9th, and 10th degrees. But Teresa of Avila describes a medieval castle and cathedral, the Millennial Kingdom residences, with the same exact 7 degrees. And I was just like, blown away. And the thing is that what I did was when I reworked the whole paper to show that what she calls the 7 dwellings, and of course she talks about 8th, 9th, and 10th level too. They all do. I actually showed that while these cathedrals and these castles were built with that in mind for the going deeper into the mysteries of heaven, It actually is a practicality for how each of us live our lives. One of the big takeaways is that when people wake up into like the first degree, they're kind of like know-it-alls, at first they're like, I should say the second degree, because people are like blown away and they're waking up to the realities of the world and they're learning everything. And then all of a sudden within like like say the flat earth, right? It's like eat, sleep, poop, flat earth for like a week or two. And that's all you just research, whatever your pill is, right? Whatever you brought you into this. And then you meet them like 3 months later and all of a sudden there's a self-proclaimed guru and they're like really snooty and they know everything. And they're telling you like, whoa, okay, you ascended really quickly there. But she talks about this in here and how that's the opening degrees. What's the first one? It's called the Raven or whatever. And it's where you have a higher aerial view of the world. You have a head up over everything and you could see how everything is functioning for the first time. But she warns that you really need to find a good teacher. You need to just settle into this and not just go out and just, start preaching and, because you actually don't know nearly as much as you think you do. And actually, when people talk about taking the red pill, that's not waking up. Actually, most people will never take the red pill. Even the truthers, they will never get to that point where they take the red pill, even in the movie The Matrix. So I take you through that and I show you all the different stages. And of course, again, Teresa is showing you to get closer to the mind, the heart and the mind of Yah himself. And it's really beautiful. So I'm surprised I wasn't like venomously attacked for this. And people took this really well. And I think more and more people are understanding that our controllers have just taken the true mysteries of heaven and they have corrupted in every way, shape, and form. To end this actual segment of it, the 7 degrees of initiation through the castles and such, I also point out the menorah. It has 7 prongs, 7 stems. And we see these are representative of the 7 feasts: Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, trumpets, atonement, and tabernacles. By the way, tabernacles has not been fully fulfilled yet. And I've had people coming at me recently. They're like, well, no, the fact that the millennial kingdom happened is proof that the Torah has been done away with. Now, right here, this is one of those things where the lawless are going to fling whatever mud and poo. There's that poo. They will throw whatever they can to see what sticks. But by that confession, if they are agreeing with me that the Torah could not have been fulfilled by the time the millennial kingdom came to an end, they're actually agreeing that the entire New Testament is Torah-centric. They don't realize they're doing that because now Paul cannot be doing away with the Torah. If he did away with the Torah, then we're in trouble because now the millennial kingdom can't happen. The millennial kingdom can only function legally if the Sabbath has not been done away with, if the Torah has not been done away with. And of course, the atonement itself. If we have done away with the Torah, then the atonement no longer sticks. We've got some major problems. But as I pointed out in my 7,000 year timeline discussion, that the 8th great day has not been fulfilled yet. Therefore, the feast have not been fulfilled. Therefore, you cannot say the Torah was done away with. If the Torah was done away with, the 8th great day will not happen. We are in a world of hurt. Look at what will not happen if the Torah is done away with. I want everyone to do that. Look at the 8th great day and what will not happen. One of them is the circumcision of our hearts. We're in a deep world of hurt. Oh, and I also talk about the 7 planets as well and all that and how they line up. It's just really interesting. And my, of course, position, my thesis, I should say, is that the 7 planets may be windows into the 7 firmaments of heaven. Which there you go right there, right? Ascending through the 7 heavens. And there is an 8th, 9th, and 10th heaven as well, just like all the mysteries proclaim. And very few people, very few Christians, very few will ascend through all 7. It's just, people just are going to be handed a reality check when they die, I think, and they go to heaven and they realize that it's not communism and it's not like equity or whatever. It's like, no, like everybody worked and they will receive rewards according to their works. And many people will not be on this equal playing field with everybody else like they think. Like this Marxist dream that you hear in modern Christianity. All right. So here then I talk about the Bastion forts. the star forts. And the big thing is that oh well, now I've changed my position a bit, and these may very well have been built used for war forts. However, my position is that these designs were not made for war. Now, our controllers, do all sorts of crazy things, and they probably blew these things up. But as you guys know, with with frozen water and stuff, we see this kind of stuff right here. When we have positive thoughts, Dr. Emoto is the one that did this, water consciousness. And it showed that when you have beautiful thoughts like thank you, wisdom, truth, eternal, peace, I love you, angel, it creates these beautiful patterns. And when you say terrible things like you fool, you make me sick, evil, whatever, the evil right there, you could even hear the Lord of the Rings song, when the ring wraiths come out and it looks like the Eye of Sauron right there. So it's amazing how we are literally these little creators, and your very thoughts, the things you think, actually manifest the world around you. It's scary to think about in a fear of Yah sort of way. Like seriously, like we need to have praiseworthy thoughts all the time, and just speak pleasantries and tell people about Yah and the goodness of who he is, and manifest this beauty around us. So anyways, whatever the star forts were used for, and you can see Michelangelo there, according to the official narrative, constructed the star forts. The problem I have with that is that these bastion forts go way back beforehand, and actual cities, the medieval cities, were built around these. So that tells you something. Now, this right here is Fort Pickens. I've done a lot of research and work there physically. I've gone to a few star forts. This is what it looks like now. You see they blew it to hell. My opinion is that star forts originally looked something like this. They would have had castles in the middle. Even this one is pretty worn down. In some cases, or here's a great one right here. There's no way, like this defeats the entire purpose of a star fort. Castle, whatever it is in Denmark, like that defeats, like a cannonball would rip right through that thing. That defeats the entire purpose. And here's a great example of a community inside one of these star forts, what I think they probably look like in America. Here's a great medieval map right here showing a blueprint of what it looked like, and there's what it is now. They stripped the whole thing out. It's gone. Destroyed it. There was a city in there at one time. So they want to go with this whole star fort narrative, but it was actually a star city. And that was a Byzantine one as well. Here's another great example right here. And going back to this, we see just in America particularly, they just blew these things to hell in the Civil War. They just gutted these things out. And here's actual pictures of me going through with my children, and I'm showing you, like, it's very disorienting when you walk through these star forts, because you go inside and you could see, like, they bricked in whole walls, they tore out walls, you could see where it originally went down here, and they bricked that in. This whole, like, they just added things left and right. We see that here where you see like new brick put in here, they close it off. Destroying its original purpose. This wall here, you could see multiple cake layers or onion layers where they just keep building it in and in and in. The closer you get, the newer the brick is, and the older it gets going out. You could see outside the walls here, just they bricked it in, whole windows, everything. This one here is really awkward because it is so low to the ground. This door, it was probably buried at some point. And you have to bend down, get to your knees to get down. It wasn't designed that way. And you step down, like clearly the ground was lower. I think even that staircase right there was built at a later time. And, if someone were to tell me that Caesar built these 2,000 years ago, I would believe them. And this looks so ancient to me. And one of the big giveaways is they tell you this was built in the 1800s. This was built in the 1800s. And they're just like, well, it's decay and all that. But then on the same grounds, you have a building that was built in 1907, like 50 years after they say the rest of it is built. And it looks like 100 years old. That looks like a building built in 1907. I can believe that. I cannot believe that this was built just like 50 to 60 years beforehand. That in 50 to 60 years, we should expect this building to look all green and decayed like that. I'm sorry. It's one of those things. So, here's where we talk about the star cities, the bastion cities all over the world, all through Europe. These are millennial kingdom cities, all built with, frequency and energy in mind, vibrations, all that kind of stuff, just the healing of the nations. This one is Paris. You can even see that was, you could see the star fort, the star city that it was. And of course, the thing is with all these, they were built, they irrigated water around it. You could see how the whole city of Paris had water around it. You could see, of course, Notre Dame is right there in the center with the river running through it, the Seine River. And that all, of course, played a part. Finishing tonight, what else do we have? Oh, the water consciousness. I'll be excited to go over this real quick. And so I talked about how we have ancient texts where it talks about how water is a conscious entity and the earth is as well. They are spirits. And that's the thing about water, is that it actually collects memory. One of the great examples is to find out if a woman is fertile or not, just with your spit. You can actually see that it ferns up when she is fertile. Like the water is giving you, the liquid in your body is giving you information, and they can just find out in very simple ways. So Veda Austin, giving her all the credit on this, she has done the research on this. She has some amazing research where she is showing how all you have to do is she'll place like pictures of ballerina over water. She has this freezing process, and the water itself will create this. But it gets really trippy because she will actually talk to the water. She will tell the water, or just think thoughts. And now these are the actual pictures she put, and then you see the water did it, eggs, and the water could actually tell if the egg was fertilized or not. She did not know. She did a bunch of eggs, and one of them did this, and she was like, "Oh, it's fertilized." And she opened it up. What do you know? The water knew. She didn't know. There's all sorts of just amazing designs, but this one here was great because this was done by one of the people who follow her work, and she was out in the garden digging. She dug up a snail, put it on her hand. She removed the snail, and then later on that day, she went to the water, did the test, and all she did is thought about what the snail felt like on her hand, and it did that imprint. This is the amazing thing about water. These here, the ring, that's from listening to the Beyonce song, Put a Ring on It. Oh yeah, this is Stairway to Heaven right here. So that's the other thing that's amazing about water, is that it can actually translate music. Like you don't need to talk to it, you don't need to give it pictures. It will listen to the songs you sing and it will materialize it. And that's one of the scary things. Think about that. The music, the music that you play entertains angels. Your guardian angels have to listen to the stuff that you play. Think about that. It's not just that, though, that it just literally will materialize around you. And so you are either spreading evil into this world or good. And here's where she did a Yeshua test. And it actually, she said, formed a Holy Grail, which is kind of interesting. I'm going to end there tonight, I think. This just goes more into the purpose of fountains of living water in the millennial kingdom, and showing how there are examples in the scripture of how Abraham and Yitzchak were going around digging wells, and people just kept going and filling them in. People in the Old Testament times, they didn't want the kingdom life. They didn't want to live according to righteousness. And the same thing we see happening in the short season, where you have these beautiful cities. I'm going to show you one example right here. Oh, here's a great one right here, where you can see the before and after pictures, where you see river canals through a lot of these medieval cities. They would actually build them based on water. And then they're all filled in with streets. All of them. They're just gone, filled in with streets. So that's really sad. So time and again, we're just seeing them all lose their purpose. I'm going to end on that note there. There's more to this. As you can see, there's like another 20% of the book I haven't even scanned through. I hope you guys enjoyed that tonight. And there's one thing I want to show you before I leave. Hold on, don't go anywhere, guys. I just lost it. Where did it go? Okay. So one of the ways you can, if you believe in the, if you have been blessed by this ministry, if you've been encouraged by this ministry has helped you in increase your knowledge in Yah and his righteous living. And of course, one thing that's really, really important to me is the Torah portions. And I've been going through them all year. And my goal has been to show that if you say the Torah is done away with and you strip that out, it's like opening up a clock. And like one of those kind of those old like stopwatches, like 1800 kind of watches, and and you see all the cogwheels. It's like ripping out cogwheels and expecting the rest of the work. They all, everything from the Torah to the Tanakh, the wisdom literature, the Gospels, the epistles, the prophets, Revelation, everything, it all works together coherently, and you can't rip it out. That the whole thing is done away with. The whole thing falls apart, and that's part of the cognitive dissonance, I think, of those who are telling you not to be obedient to Yah, where they're literally whispering in your ear, did God really say, right? Did he really tell you that? Is that really what he said? We have a lot of that going on. But if this ministry has done any of these things, then I will ask you to be a ministry partner. And I'm not just a YouTuber, right? I'm an author, but I'm a ministry leader, but also we are a widows ministry, and we're supporting 2 elderly women where they are dependent on this support to come through every month. I'm dependent on it. My family's dependent on it. And of course, we put a huge emphasis on putting out books of ancient knowledge, but also translating the Bible from the Paleo. And if you didn't know that, that's something I don't even talk about it enough, even though I do, read from the Paleo through our Torah portions every week. People don't know. People don't know that we are translating the Paleo, and Pamela's doing that. Is a huge task. She is called by Yah personally to do it. So anyways, one of the things, if you come over to Patreon, one of the great things about Patreon is that we have all these different levels. I mean, I'm showing you there's 500,000, there's 150, 100, 70, 50, 30, 20, 15, 5, make up your own. But the great thing is that when you come in, and whatever you give to this, whatever you invest into this ministry every month through Patreon, you get a coupon back for the same amount that you gave in, up to $150 every month, that you can come and spend in our store. And you can get the books, you can get Don's products, you can get teas, you can get soaps, you can get all sorts of stuff. You don't even have to give books. You just get gifts for friends. Just give it to people. And you're actually, helping Don with his work. You're helping Pamela. You're helping, all these different people, these different vendors. You're helping me out. Just something to consider. So looking for ministry partners. Of course, there's GoFundMe. There's other avenues as well. And, we need to meet our goals every month. So this is just an operation where we trust in Yah that he will provide for us. Love you guys. Good night. I hope you guys enjoy that. I hope that it was informative for you guys. I hope you guys are walking away going, okay, I got a good sense of a lot of his research in there. And if you have more questions, go pick up a book. That's a great thing. Go become a Patreon subscriber and partner with this ministry, and boom, you get the coupon, go get the book one month. And then the next month you can get another book, or just get the same one again and give it to your friend, Anyways, love you guys. Good night. We'll do this again.